Would you please stand for the reading of the word? The living word today comes from 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 32 through 47. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off his sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue you from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord will be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. "I cannot go in these," he said to Saul, "because I am not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in his pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with the sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He took David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "I'll give you your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and spear and javelin, but I have come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I give you the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that this is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated.
Clearly, Rob is. Sorry, electronics. Gotta see me. So, the bottom line, can you guys hear me when I stand over here?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm probably going to be all over, and so I'll just know to talk a little louder. So, the bottom line for this morning is honor others by giving them a chance, okay? And so, I was trying to come up with a sermon title, and I was trying to figure out how do I mean, we've heard the tale of David and Goliath how many times? I mean, if you've never opened a Bible before in your life, you know this story, right? You've heard this story. So I was trying to come up with a title, and Andrew actually was helping me, and I kept shooting all his down because, I'm like, no. And then, so I came up with Being a Shepherd in a Warrior's World. Because I think sometimes that's how we feel, that we're the shepherd in a world filled with warriors. Or maybe not filled with warriors, but that's what everybody's looking for, right? Everybody's looking for the warrior. Andrew told me that title was generic and that it basically lacked imagination. But I went with it. So, yeah, he loves me. I feel it. So, growing up, when Lent would come around, we never did the give something up for 40 days or whatever. If you all do that, that's great. Continue to do that when Lent comes around. But then when I became a pastor at Shiloh, I was trying to figure out what to do for Lent, because it didn't feel natural to tell my congregation, you should do something, you should give something up, if I knew clearly that I was not going to do that. So I was trying to figure it out. And what I came up with was, instead of giving up chocolate, which I really don't care about, or pop or something, I decided to try to change a habit. So then I had to figure out which habit, bad habit, let's clarify, which bad habit I was going to change. And there's only one or two bad habits, so it was really hard. Which one? So I have a plethora of bad habits. Unlike you, I'm sure for you guys, it's just the one or two. But I have a plethora, so I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? And one of the things, and I'm sure none of you do this, I'm sure it's none of you, maybe Melissa, but I bet the rest of you don't do any of this. So, I like to people watch, right? But I'm also sarcastic, right? Got that look. So, for maybe every 5 people who walk past me when I'm people watching, I have a sarcastic remark in my head for probably at least 3 of them. I mean, let's be honest, at least 3, probably 5, but we're just going to be generous and say 3. So, for Lent, what I tried to do was, I tried to recondition my brain so that when I saw someone, that I didn't make that snap decision on who they were, what they did, what they couldn't do. You see somebody with piercings and tattoos and purple hair, and you're like, yeah, I'm sure they got a job, right? So there's some sort of sarcastic thing that comes to your head. And so for the duration of Lent, that's what I tried to work on, was that I didn't do that. I didn't just assume when I saw someone who looked a certain way that they were a certain way, right? And if you look at this story about David and Goliath, Saul kind of does that with David, right? So David comes in, and back up. David's 3 brothers are already in the army with Saul, okay? So David's home, he's taking care of sheep, he's being a shepherd, he's doing his thing. And his dad says, take all of this food, go check on your brothers, see how the war's going, bring back news, let us know how everything's going. So David goes. And when he gets there, he sees this giant of a man who's like 9 feet tall, standing out in the middle of the field, just saying awful things about Israel's army, about Israel, about the army, and about God. And David is like, what? The what? Right? That's a Jody thing. I can't. It's in my head now. So he has all this, you have this army. We are God's army. And you are standing here doing nothing while this one person is coming out and just running his mouth about us and about God. Well, Saul finds out that there's somebody out there making these comments, and he wants him brought to him. So they bring David to Saul. And David says, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Right? And Saul immediately replies, you're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from his youth. Right? So immediately, Saul makes a snap judgment about what David can and can't do. Simply by the way he looks and the fact that he's just merely a shepherd. He's just a shepherd. That dude's been training to be a warrior his whole life. He's like 9 foot tall, you're like 6 foot nothing, right? There's no way this is going to work. How often do we do that in our daily lives, right? You go to the hairdresser, right? It's a new place, you're going to try it out. You walk in, and the only person who's available has blue hair with a crazy style, right? And you're like, she is not touching my head. Or you go to a new dentist, right? And that dental hygienist comes out and he calls your name and he's 6'3" and he's got sausage for fingers and you're like, oh no. You know? Car salesman. I apologize if there's any hairstylists, car salesman, dental hygienists in the room. Car salesman. I mean, how many times have you gone to get a car and because of the way that they come out, I mean, it's like putting chum in the water sometimes, right? They come out and they're like, you don't know what to do. But it's those snap, you know, it's those typical stereotypes that we have for certain occupations. But here's the thing. That girl with the blue hair, she may be the one person that knows exactly how to cut your hair so that your colic doesn't do this, right? Or do this, or you know what I mean? She could be the nicest person that you've ever met. She could be the one person that you're supposed to share God with today. But because she had blue hair and a crazy style, you were ready to walk out. Right? The dental hygienist. He could be the most gentle person you've ever met in your life. Maybe he's supposed to share with you today a story about God's redeeming power. And you're going to miss out on that if you allow your snap judgments to control you. The car salesman. He may be the one guy who can get you into the vehicle that you want with a price that you can actually afford. Not the one he can afford or the one he wants, but the one that you can actually afford. David says to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it, I rescued the sheep, and when it turned on me, I seized it. I struck it, I killed it. I have killed a bear. I have killed a lion. I will kill this Philistine. And I will do that because I have the power of God on my side." We look at those chosen throughout the Bible. Moses was 80, had killed someone, had a stutter. David. Now we're hearing about David now when he is a younger man and he's going up against Goliath. But we all know the stories of Bathsheba. We know what he does later. At one point, God calls Rahab. She was a prostitute. Mary was a teenager. Peter was someone who could not pause and think before he said or acted. Paul would have killed all 12 of those disciples and would have given Jesus into the hands. He would have nailed Jesus to the cross himself if he had had the opportunity. God does not call those who are perfect, those who are equipped. He calls us because we have a heart that is open. Because when he calls, he knows we are ready to answer. He called David because David was ready. David had the heart. I mean, you look at Goliath and you look at David, you look at the comparisons of the two of them. If you wanted a warrior, which one would you pick? God could have simply picked Goliath. He could have just as easily picked Goliath. But when you heard the story of Goliath and David, if Goliath had won, would you have ever thought that that was because he had God on his side? Truly? A 9-foot man who's wearing armor that weighs nearly 130 pounds, wielding a sword, takes out a shepherd who's 6 foot nothing with a sling. God called David because in the end, David gives the honor to where it belongs. He gives it to God. Goliath was there for himself. He had been a warrior, had been training his whole life. When David is victorious, the result will be that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. This is no ordinary battle, but one in which God's honor was at stake. And in this circumstance, David's exposure to danger permitted God's honor to be more clearly acknowledged than if David had obviously been more of a match. Goliath is clearly the warrior. But Goliath would have never given the honor to God. David was called. When we face towering problems, we need to look back and recall how God has helped us in the past. We need to take heart because God gives us strength. We need to use the skills that God has already given us, and we use those then to honor him by moving forward. We may not all have a battle per se in our lives. We talked last month about courage and having the courage to move forward and not being stuck. When you use the skills that God has given you to move forward, you are honoring God. Each and every one of you honor God every Sunday when you use your voice, which is a gift from God, for our service. You are lifting us up. You are preparing this whole congregation to get ready. You've all been called. And you may be sitting out there saying, well, I don't sing, so I don't have any gifts. I do not like talking in front of people. I don't think that I do it well. God called me anyway. And I was dumb enough to answer that phone. Right? We all have something. Maybe you have the ability to just listen to others. Right? And when we use the gifts that God has given us, we honor God. When we allow others around us who may look like shepherds, when we honor them by allowing them to step out and do and use their gifts, we allow them to be warriors. We're honoring God. How do we treat people? Do we give them a chance? Do we help lift people up? Or do we overlook them? Do we give the shepherds of the world a chance when we're looking for warriors? David says to Goliath, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." David comes with courage and hope, not because of superior weapons or training, but because his trust is in the surprising possibilities of God's deliverance. When we give others a chance to do what quite possibly only they can do, we not only honor that person, but we honor God. And I want to say that again because I want you to really hear it. When we give others a chance to do what quite possibly only they can do, we not only honor them, but we honor God.